What's up, session stylists? So you're planning on putting together your own shoot for a competition, for a collection, for editorial submission, or for branding for your business. If you're a hairstylist putting together a shoot, you'll have to wear several hats. You'll be the producer, the client, the creative director, you'll be the hair director. You might even end up being catering, locations, cleaning, all at the same time on the same day. So breaking up the project into 3 distinct phases will give you a structure to work with and will help keep it all together up here. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to choose a photographer. 6 things you need to know before you ask for a quote. 3 things to consider when booking talent, booking the rest of the crew, and some tips for the shoot day and beyond. And the 3 phases are pre-production, production, and post-production. And you can only do one of these at a time, and they can only be done in that order. So let's start with pre-production. Pre-production is where you'll do things like finalize your concept, build your mood board, set the shoot date and your prep schedule, find and book your team and your location. So once you have your idea or your concept decided on, the first and, in my opinion, the most important task is to find your photographer. So here are some ways to find the ideal photographer for your shoot. First of all, you could look at the different awards platforms in the hair industry and see which photographers the winners and finalists are using. However, this wouldn't be my first choice, nor would it be my recommendation for the following reasons. Right, there are pros and cons to choosing a photographer that works in the hair industry. Because on the one hand, you can be pretty confident that you know what you're getting, you know what the shots are going to look like, and you know that they actually like and enjoy shooting hair. And on the other hand, well, you pretty much know what you're getting, and it could end up looking a lot like other people's work, because most photographers tend to have a certain look or a style to their work. You can pick their work, and most of the hair industry photographers tend to work mostly within our little bubble. So if you're looking for something different, my personal recommendation is that you look outside the hair industry at the top fashion and beauty photographers. This will give you a point of difference with your images. And of course, if your goal is to work in the industry as a session stylist, then these are the people that you want to build relationships with. These are the people that you're ultimately going to end up working with, and this could give you future opportunities. Now, the next point, and this might seem super obvious, but I think it's important to say, try and find a photographer whose style matches your vision for the shoot. Because trying to get a photographer to shoot against their natural style, it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It just, it doesn't always work out that great. To give you an example of what I mean by that, you wouldn't book Alan von Unworth to shoot like Paolo Reversi, for example. So you're going to start by making a list of people whose work you admire, and here's 3 places you can look to find the right photographers. So the first and best place to look is the agencies that represent artists working in fashion in your city or country. When you're looking for agencies, if you do a quick search of the Googles and it's not much help, then models.com is a great resource for finding agencies and photographers working in fashion and beauty around the world. In fact, models.com is actually a great resource for all people fashion and beauty related. Number 2, my favorite way of discovering talent is to go old school. All you need to do is look at the credits in the local versions of Vogue and Bazaar, Elle, Marie Claire, Allure, 10, InStyle, L'Officiel, etc. to see whose work you like. And number 3 is Instagram. I know this seems obvious, but hopefully you're following all the publications I just mentioned, along with their fashion editors and beauty editors, and you'll start seeing their top makeup artists, models, hairstylists, and photographers. What you'll also start seeing is that those people tend to tag their favorite artists and collaborators in their post, and this to me is kind of the new school equivalent of the old school magazine credits. So there's 3 places to look. Once you've got a list of photographers whose work you'll like, you'll need to narrow it down to a couple of options and then reach out to their agency to get a quote, or direct to the photographer if they don't have an agent. Now, prices and costs will vary depending on the photographer, and a good agent will almost always match the quote to your budget. My suggestion is to tell them your budget after you get the quote, because if it's higher than expected, you can always let them know how much you've got to spend, and hopefully they can work with your budget and somehow make it work. But you never know, the quote might actually come in less than you expected, but it probably won't if you've already told them how much you've got. Now, the quote from the photographer or their agent will be based on the hard costs of the shoot, including the day rates for the artist, their equipment and their team, plus the usage of the images for a specific or specified period of time. So here's 6 things you need to ask before you ask for a quote. That's 6. 1, what's the date of the shoot? And how flexible are you on that date? Number 2, where will the shoot be? What city will it be in? Will it be studio or location, or is it still TBD? Are you looking for suggestions from the photographer or their agent? And do you need a weather contingency day in the case of a location shoot? Number 3, how many shots do you need to get on the day? This is important for a number of reasons, but it's for timing on the day and also to help quote retouching. How many talent are you shooting? Again, this is important to understand for timing on the day, how realistic your expectations are for the shoot day, and also for quoting retouching. Number 5, what's the usage? A very important thing you need to be clear about before booking your photographer is usage. In other words, how are the images going to be used? Are you using them for advertising? Is it editorial? A competition? Social media? Portfolio only? Usage has to do with copyright and ownership of the image, and it's one of the key components of how a job is priced. So to try and explain it, now I'm not a lawyer and I'm not in any position to explain the law or give any legal advice, so I'll just give you my kind of layperson's understanding of copyright, so you kind of have a bit of a 30,000 foot overview. Now, just because you commission and or pay for a shoot, it doesn't mean you own the images and can do whatever you want with them. The creator of the images, the artist, being the photographer, owns the images and will assign the rights to copyright, for a certain period of time and for a specific purpose, and to a specific person actually. So anything other than this has to be agreed in writing, which is why before you reach out to the photographer or their agent for a quote, it's important to be really clear about how you plan to use the pictures. And if you're planning to enter them into a competition, please make sure that you check and communicate any fine print in the rules and regulations about assignment of rights to the organizers of that competition. And 6, have you booked the rest of the crew yet? If yes, who are they? And if no, do you want suggestions or recommendations in a quote for makeup and styling as well from the agency? Now, a few other things you might want to consider when you're booking a photographer. Where are they based? Are they local, or do you need to budget for them to travel to you, flights and accommodation, etc.? And if you're bringing them to you, how many assistants or operators or support crew do they need, and will those assistants travel with them, or will they find local talent to help them on the day? What gear do they need to travel with? Do they need extra allowance for gear? Do they need a carnet if they're traveling internationally? Like a carnet is basically like a temporary export-import document. It has some minor costs involved and time to fill out. Do you have to pay for travel days, and at what rate? And FYI, travel is usually charged at 60% of an artist's day rate. So some tips for booking the rest of the team. Before you cast for models, confirm a makeup artist or book a stylist, there are 3 things that you must do to get the best results from your shoot day. And they are: number 1, talk to the photographer. Number 2, talk to the photographer. And number 3, talk to the photographer. This is especially important before you book the talent. In my opinion, the second most important element in the hierarchy of an image is the talent. So before you go ahead and book any talent, talk to your photographer about doing the casting together or collaboratively, because their eye is highly tuned for what makes someone photogenic, and they can tell all sorts of things. Like, for example, if someone's cute or pretty or interesting looking on Instagram, they can tell if they're actually going to be able to work well on set and take direction. And, you know, some talent might only look good in a certain light or from a certain angle or with a certain pose or with a ton of makeup. And for us, we tend to be more focused on the hair and the creative concept. So I don't know about you, but I can easily be distracted by someone that's going to let me do the haircut or color I'm imagining. And a great photographer will really help, because they'll be able to spot these subtle tells, and casting together with the photographer will really take your game to a whole new level. Now, if you're traveling to another city to shoot, are you going to take talent with you, or are you going to source the talent locally? In which case, where will you do any cutting and coloring you might want to do is a good question to ask yourself. Can you use a friend's salon? Or maybe you can talk to one of the brands that you work with or stock and see if they can help you with a place to prep, like one of their academies or so on. With the models, you need to be super clear about usage and what the images are being used for. If it's editorial, you'll pay less for the talent fee, and you might even be able to offer a trade for hair services or products. And if it's advertising, you might need to pay them a commercial rate, which will need to be negotiated with their agent. The reason you pay the talent more for advertising jobs is because if you're using their face to advertise your business, they won't be able to work for any other hair brands or maybe even certain beauty brands for the term of the contract, for the term of the usage, which could potentially and will definitely actually cut them out of opportunities to make money. On that note, actually, it's always better to negotiate before the shoot where possible. Negotiating extra usage after the fact can end up costing you way more in the long run. It might seem cheaper at first, but it never usually works out. Now, prices range wildly. Model agents tend to negotiate a bit like sellers in a Marrakesh market. They start out with this outrageously high price, which I'm sure they know no one's ever going to accept. And they end up settling for what they'll tell you is an absolute bargain, but somehow it always feels like you're paying a lot more than what you expected. Anyway, that's how it goes with models. Finally, when booking talent, be super clear about any changes you'd like to make with their look, particularly with their hair, both with the model and with their agent, because sometimes agents are a lot less into hair changes than the models. And cutting and coloring hair is going to limit your options, so I would suggest being really flexible about your desired looks, because, for example, you might find an amazing model that wants to shoot with your incredible photographer, which could end up an amazing image. And if you're open-minded enough, and if you're willing to pivot on your hair ideas, you could end up with something that you didn't expect and surprises everybody and blows your mind. So once you've got the talent locked in, it's on to booking the rest of the team, or looking for and finding the rest of the team. So makeup and wardrobe don't generally charge different rates for different usages. They should just have a fixed day rate for the job. And again, talking to your photographer about who they prefer working with will help you to pull together a killer team that works really well together, and hopefully you'll end up with a better outcome all around just because of the shorthand that you've already got on set. Now with wardrobe, it sometimes feels like it's one of those things you can quite easily DIY, and sometimes you can get away with it, but having someone dedicated to sourcing the clothes, especially accessories, putting them together on the day, making sure they fit, making sure they shoot well, and then taking care of all of the returns, it just makes a huge difference, and it's going to free you up to make all the other decisions that you're going to need to make on the day when you're the client, the creative director, the producer, and the hair director all at the same time. Now, a quick note on wardrobe. If you're just shooting beauty, shoes may not be necessary, but some talent feel like they work better in heels, so it could be useful just to have some on set even if you're not going to see them. And you might also need to allow a little bit of budget for hiring stuff and dry cleaning after the shoot. Now with all your team, with each member of the team, you want to have a first choice and you want to have a second choice, because they might not all be available on the same day in the same location, and if your first choice doesn't fit your budget, then you're going to need to have a good second choice or backup. So that pretty much wraps up the pre-production part. Next, let's talk about production. Now, production is basically the mechanical part of going through and booking and confirming everything and sending out a call sheet. It should take a lot less time than pre-production, because by now you've done all your research, you've made all the big decisions, you've got all the information you need. Now, here's a list of items you need to tick off to make sure that you are ready to shoot. Photographer, location, talent, hair prep day and resources, makeup, wardrobe, brief and mood board, catering if there's any dietary requirements, first aid, talent release forms, assistance, a weather contingency plan if you're shooting on location, because if you need a weather day for all the critical crew, and then electricity if you're shooting on location, and lastly, the call sheet. Now you could also think about if there's any particular music you'd like to play on the day to create a vibe, and maybe some comfortable supplies like robes and hotties for the talent, maybe some nice chockies. But anyway, if you've got all that done, you should be able to relax and enjoy the organized chaos of the shoot and make some magic hair moments happen. Now after the shoot, you'll need to do post-production. So the 4 things you'll need to wrap in post are quite simple. It's just selecting the images, retouching, final files, and then paying everyone. When it comes to making your selects, you need to ask the photographer or their agent how they prefer to do this, because some like to do it on the day as you go, or at least kind of narrowing it down to the 2 or 3 favorites from each look, and others prefer to send you a whole batch of low-res unretouched images for you to make your selects from after the shoot in your own time. Find out how much time they like to allow for retouching, when they're likely to be able to fit in the retouching, or if they prefer to outsource it. This is going to be particularly important to consider if you have a hard date for submission or publication of your images, so you'll need to work backwards from that date. Then get your final files either on a hard drive or by file transfer, make a copy and save them somewhere, and finally pay everyone. So there you have it. That's a crash course in photo shoot production. Man, we covered a lot, right? We talked about how to choose a photographer. We covered 6 things you need to know before you ask for a quote. We talked about the 3 things to consider when booking talent, booking the rest of the crew, and we talked about some tips for the shoot day and beyond. Now, in another lesson, I want to talk to you about how to pull together a team on a shoestring budget and some other ways that you can go about getting onto different teams for photo shoots and for shows. But for now, that's this one, and we'll see you in the next one.